Hello and welcome to this episode of Upfront, right here on Shaw Spotlight. I'm your host, Nancy Wilmot. And today's guest should be familiar to everybody from the Alberni Valley. She is an Alberni girl. She left to pursue her education and came back with her husband to raise a family, start a business, eventually run for city council, and now she is the mayor of our fair city. It's with great pleasure that I introduce Sharie Minions. Sharie, welcome to Upfront.
Thank you, Nancy. Thanks for having me. And that introduction still always seems strange to me because it just remains to be the strangest thing to be the mayor of the community that you grew up in. But thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
And you know, Sharie, I hadn't remembered this, but I looked through your bio, I have to admit it, before the show, and you had a campaign slogan when you ran for mayor. Now is our time. We must create a shift in focus. Well, here we are, a little bit over halfway through this term as mayor. How is it going?
Yeah, I think that in some ways we've been forced into a shift in focus because through COVID, through all of the changes that we've had in this community over the last couple of years, we've really been forced to look at things differently, to reevaluate the decisions that we're making, reevaluate where we're focusing our money and what our priorities are really as a community. So it's been interesting. It's been a challenge, absolutely. And I've joked at times, it seems like since I took over as mayor, we've had one disaster after another, unfortunately, just largely in the world, things outside of our concern, but our community has been through a lot in this time. Overall, I remain really optimistic. I love being in this role and I love this community. I just see, so much potential in the future and I love where we're at today. So, yeah.
Now, Sharie, you say you love this role, but I'm on social media and I know that public officials are fair game. Fair comment is made on all of our elected officials, but I can't help but feel that they're being a little bit tougher on you, and it seems like it's because you're a woman. Am I imagining that?
I do sometimes think, specific people are harder on me because I'm a woman, but also because I'm a younger person in this role. There is a way of doing things in this community that I think I have disrupted somewhat, not intending to be disrespectful, but, just really I ran for a shift in focus. I ran not to just sit in the seat, but to really make some intentional and strategic changes in the community that I want to raise my kids in and spend the rest of my life in. And so it has been challenging. And I do constantly say, I love this role. I love every day of it. But there are certainly points in some days that I do not love. And yeah, it can be challenging. And Facebook is a big piece of that for sure.
Now, Port Alberni has certainly had a female mayor before. Gillian Trumper was our mayor for multiple terms, but she didn't have to contend with social media. It's a whole different world out there. You made the decision to be active on social media, Facebook in particular. Why did you make that decision, and do you ever regret it?
Yeah, so social media is, I should start by saying, yes, I regret it every day, but it remains incredibly important to me. When I was on council, I was really active on social media and I felt like I had a really firm grasp of what was going on in the community because of that. And, that's maybe not fair to say because social media certainly doesn't represent everyone, but I felt like at least I was having the opportunity to represent a segment of our population that wasn't being represented before. They weren't engaged prior. They didn't know what was going on in the municipal government or even really who we were or what we did. And so I felt so connected to that group of people as a counselor because I was on social media. And I really intended to come into being mayor and, live that just the same. And maybe a bit naive in recognizing how that would shift a bit as I got into this role, because I am now more, I'm the leader of our council and, certainly more the target when people don't like the decisions that we're making. So social media has gotten a lot more aggressive and challenging over the last couple of years in this role for sure. But I really do remain connected to and committed to being on that platform. There are a lot of people that, just don't go out to community events or, just didn't know what was going on in the community before. And I feel like they do now because of social media. And, so I felt so connected to that group of people as a counselor because I was on social media. And I really do remain connected to and committed to being on that platform. There are a lot of people that, just don't go out to community events or, just didn't know what was going on in the community before. And I feel like they do now because of social media. And that said, I've also taken a few steps back from social media. I'm not as active today as I was when I was elected. I'm certainly nowhere near as active on social media, responding to questions and comments and really, engaging in actual back and forth dialogue than I was when I was a councillor. And that was an intentional decision as well. I removed myself from AV Chatterbox as a group probably about a year ago. And I really thought long and hard about that decision because to me, that group is, 20,000 people, obviously not all of them living in the Alberni Valley, but such a great source of information for what is going on in this community. And it's a great way to get a feel for how people do feel about the decisions that we're making as a local government. I felt like it was a great way to stay connected. And I made the decision to take myself off of it because although I value that so much, you have to balance that with mental well-being and the ability to sleep at night and not be going to sleep and be being tagged on social media consistently. And I started with trying to just put my phone away so that I wasn't thinking about that when I was trying to go to sleep at night. And it just, the tags keep coming. There's a few people who were really aggressive, and I just thought it's not worth it for me to be dragged down in this role, in a way that makes me not want to do it anymore. So made the decision to step off of that platform. And I find I have a lot more respectful and productive dialogue on other pages on social media.
It's got to almost be like whack-a-mole. I mean, there are so many conversations going on, and some of them might tag you at Sharie Minions, but others might mention Sharie, might mention the mayor. You don't even know those conversations are going on. And before you know it, they've blown up into 150 posts on a single comment. I don't know how you keep track of that. And as you say, it's wonderful to have all that input. But the other side of it is so many people feel that they're giving input, they're giving their opinions. Do you run the risk of maybe disillusioning them? Because obviously you can't respond and you can't act on every bit of information or input or opinion that you're getting from the public. How do you satisfy them?
You don't. you get used to not satisfying people, I guess. We do the best that we can. And I think social media is such a critical piece of how we gather information as counselors and, in this role. It can't be the only way. There's still going out to the grocery store and bumping into people and having conversations. There's community events. There's, different networking and social groups. I think that they are all important. And I think that, we have counselors who don't utilize social media and choose not to. And they might go out to events that I might not naturally be at. So I think we're all doing our best to cover the community in different ways. But taking input from the public does not necessarily mean voting the way that, you hear the public wanting you to. We're elected to make decisions, and being informed on what the community is thinking and feeling is an important way that, we make those decisions. But we don't make decisions based on public opinion, unfortunately, or we would probably have a budget 10 times what it is now.
I think also sometimes there is just confusion about the jurisdiction of the various levels of government. What is provincial, what is federal, and what is municipal? And yet when a citizen of Port Alberni sees something they don't like, you are the face of local government that they see, and they want Sharie and the council to take care of whatever it is. Am I correct? Is there sometimes jurisdictional confusion?
Yeah, there's so much confusion. And I think that the issues that people care, deeply about often are not within the realm of municipal responsibilities. And so, people want us to do something about it. People want us to do something about everything. And I think in some ways it's almost a compliment that people kind of feel like their municipal government can tackle any issue. And at the same time, we need to make sure, again, that we're having that balance. So I believe that as a municipal government, we do have a role in every issue, but our role isn't necessarily solving it. Our role isn't necessarily, opening up a specific service, or our role can be in advocating to higher levels of government. We are so fortunate right now to have just an amazing MLA and MP both so connected to this community and engaged in what we're doing. We have such an opportunity to work with other levels of government. And I really optimistically feel like we can make a big difference in some of these issues that people care about right now. But we can't take it on our own. We don't have the expertise. We don't have the professional knowledge. We don't have the budget for it. And I think that when we try to take on issues on our own without going through proper channels of government, we won't be able to do it as effectively, and we're almost taking away from what the provincial government is supposed to do. Like, who are we to say we're going to solve mental health and addictions? It's not our role. There's a Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions at the provincial government. We need to be their eyes and ears to the ground, bring them the information, work with nonprofits to find solutions. We need to be the voice to bring those forward and really be the I've really tried to do. And for me, so much of it is about relationships with higher levels of government. And I think we're starting to see that approach pay off in a few different ways.
Now, somewhere in the middle of that, you mentioned budget. And of course, budget is the biggest thing that's going on right now. It is budget time. And I know people often get hung up on that first figure that comes out. But really, that is just the start of a very long process. It's like it's a starting point that the budget is built from. And often people aren't quite sure of what that process is. Could you explain the budget process?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is budget time right now. So it's an exciting time for those of us who love municipal government. It is budget time, and the people do get very fixated on what the number is generally, and whether that's the number at the start, the number at the end. I always say, the only number that's acceptable to the community is probably a negative one in most people's eyes. People want to see our costs decrease, and I get that. I want my taxes to go down as well. We all do. We would be crazy to not. But we need to make sure that we're not just necessarily looking at what that percentage increase or decrease is. We're looking at what is in the best long-term interest of this community. We have to make sure that we're addressing roads, street, sewer, drainage, all of that. We have a lot of, somewhat boring responsibilities that the average person doesn't necessarily notice. They notice when their street has potholes, or when their water starts working, but stops working. They don't necessarily think about it beforehand. And we have an infrastructure deficit that we've been working to address for several years. I'm really proud to say that we're going in the right direction. We're funding more infrastructure every year. And that initially was led by our last council, led by Mayor Rattan. And I think it was a fantastic move that now we're following to make sure that we are properly funding our infrastructure, so that 20 years down the road, we're not left with, holes in the streets everywhere or infrastructure that's not working. So we're trying to look at the bigger picture. Right now is the start of budget process. So we had our first budget presented from the Director of Finance 2 weeks ago. We had it presented again in detail at our last council meeting on Monday. There's going to be tons of opportunities. The next one coming up is February 8th for members of the public to engage. And this is a place where I really like to encourage people to try to engage in the most formal way possible. So, earlier I talked about social media and how we all gather information in different ways. The nice thing about social media is you're able to give a quick tidbit to, a counselor you might be connected to, or to myself, but that information doesn't necessarily make it to all of council. And for budget, I believe it's so important that we're able to hear input from the public in a way where we're all gathering the same information, all 7 of us on council. So we do have an email address that we've recently developed, very simple, council@portalberni.ca. If you want to take part in a budget meeting, you're welcome to. They're all electronic. You're welcome to take part. You can email that, and you'll be able to come on our Zoom meetings and speak for yourself during specific periods of the meeting. You can also email in input. There's other less formal ways as well, but using that email, you'll be able to know that every member of council is going to hear that information and be able to use it to form our decisions.
Now, you came to this office, you were elected with a promise of a shift in focus, and out of that, you and your council have created a strategic plan. How on earth do you balance that strategic plan with the everyday needs of budget that have to be considered when you're putting this document together?
Yeah, so I have to just say first that our strategic plan is the piece of, council that I am the proudest of at this point, what we've done in the last over 2 years. And it really does a lot of strategic plans. And I've spoken to many other mayors and councillors, friends of mine in other parts of the area, who say, oh yeah, we create a strategic plan. And then we don't really look at it again, or we look at it once a year. My council looks at that strategic plan every week. I carry it around in my purse with me every single day. I give them out all the time. In every decision that we make, we are considering our strategic plan. We have done several reviews of the strategic plan already. We review the strategic work plan regularly just to make sure that we're still on track with what we want to be doing. We know that some of our goals are big, lofty, long-term goals, but I really believe as an elected government, we shouldn't be thinking just within our term. That's not the responsible thing to do. We need to be planning for well outside of our term. And hopefully that strategic plan doesn't just get thrown out by the next council. But if you are thinking long-term outside your plan, you're communicating to the public what you're doing, then I believe, aspects of that will be continued, whoever the next mayor and council are. Balancing that is challenging, especially right now. And last budget year, we were very close to passing our budget that would have taken us, made some pretty significant steps toward achieving some of our strategic goals. And at our last budget meeting before we were about to pass the budget, we took over $800,000 of projects out of our budget. That was a result of the pandemic. It was very early in the pandemic. That was in April. Businesses were closing. People were losing their jobs. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know where the community would be in a month, 2 months, 3 months. And so, we felt that it was our responsibility to cut as much as possible, anything that wasn't absolutely vital. And we did that. And I really stand behind that decision. Now going forward, we have a little bit more certainty. We know there's still challenge out there, and we know there's challenge ahead as well. So we're trying to balance moving forward some of those strategic initiatives with making sure we're also putting money in reserves, making sure that we are not just quickly spending the money that the provincial government recently gave us to adapt to COVID. We're looking for grant opportunities. So it's all about balance. We know that, COVID is not over, and the financial difficulties for many people out of COVID are not over. At the same time, we do want to look far out and try to find ways to make sure that we're not just standing still, but continuing to improve the community.
Okay, but Sharie, I'm going to challenge that just a little bit. Key to key walkway. This is a topic that comes up regularly in discussion groups online, and it certainly is part of the strategic plan. But how do you balance that with the very real community concerns about drug addiction, about homelessness, about violence? How do you balance that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think that crime in the community is something that is a part of our strategic plan as well. So we have made significant efforts to obviously, fund properly our RCMP force in response to crime. We increased our amount of officers that we have in the community last year, and I'm really proud that we did that because crime is a huge concern for us. We also, a key in our strategic plan is non-police efforts in reducing crime. So we've created a community policing, sector, and we have to coordinate volunteers. We've got a public safety manager now. We have the public safety building that we're about to create very soon. We're really making big efforts to clamp down on some of the very dangerous housing that does exist in our community. So I would say on the public safety crime piece, that has been actually a big budget focus area for us. Homelessness is a real challenge because I think we could use our entire budget and not make it necessarily a significant impact on reducing homelessness in our community. And I think that really goes back to what we talked about earlier in levels of government. It's not a problem we can solve on our own, but what I think is important is that we do have many ways to make an impact on mental health, addiction, homelessness that are not necessarily budget lines. And we have to be creative with utilizing some of the land that we have. So there's several applications for funding that have gone forward to provincial and federal government where we've been able to donate land. So that doesn't have a budget impact, but it does, progress some of these really important projects that are going forward to build not just affordable housing, but supportive housing as well. It's one thing to talk about putting people in houses that are affordable. It is a very different thing to, look at what supports those people need to actually break the cycles that they're in and be properly supported to improve their lives. So this is an ongoing conversation, and as much as people would love to see a simple solution, I would love to see a simple solution. There isn't one. We are having conversations every single day. I've never talked to BC Housing so much in my life. I'm very thankful for them as a partner at all levels, from the top right down to, the people that they have working on plans. Very thankful for them as a partner in the provincial government in this. MP Gord Johns has been fantastic as well. So we're doing all we can, but recognizing that it's not a problem we're going to solve on our own. And I will talk about Key to Key because it is something that I am, incredibly excited about. It is a cornerstone project in our strategic plan. It's also a long-term project. But one thing that we really do focus on in our strategic plan is looking for different ways to fund projects. So rather than just going to the taxpayers for everything, really looking at strategic opportunities to fund, whether that's through sponsorships, whether that's through, doing a strategic review of the land that we own as a municipality and what is strategic to own long-term and what is just sitting and not providing any value necessarily that could be providing revenues, whether long-term tax revenues or initial sales. We're looking really creatively at ways that we can fund these projects so that they don't significantly impact taxpayers through tax increases, because we know that people are at the top of what they can afford to pay. I certainly feel that. So we're trying to be creative and yet again still balance the needs of the community today and long term.
It's got to be a hard thing. And in many ways, your council has been left with some very hard decisions to make. You've become the council that is making the tough decisions to make cuts. And in particular, I'm thinking of McLean Mill. I mean, I was there in the year 2000 when it opened to such promise. There was such excitement. There was the Tin Pants Theatre Troupe. There were the trains. There were regular tours. And so many volunteers have worked over the years to keep it running, to keep it going, to build it into something. And yet you've got a tough decision to make. How do you do that?
There were hard decisions in front of the last council as well. And I think McLean Mill has been this project for many councils now that, we're always trying to fix. And it's a shame because it frames McLean Mill then, because of the budgetary implications, as this negative thing, and it's not. It's such a positive in our community. I mean, it's so important to the history of this community, and recognizing and appreciating that history going forward. And even history aside, it's just an incredible site. And it is what it is today because of what the volunteers have put into it. An incredible amount. I can't imagine another, community asset that has had anywhere near the attention, the hours, just the blood, sweat, and tears as McLean Mill has by the volunteers. So it does remain a challenge, though. And, I have been somewhat critical of McLean Mill for sure in the financial aspect, because I really do see the big needs of this community that we continue to have, that we have for a long time. And it is all about balance. And I say balance a lot, but balance means we have to be critical of the money that we're already spending if we want to find money for new projects that we feel will improve the community long term. So we are looking very critically at every area of spending that we have as a municipality. And unfortunately, that has led to some changes. And McLean Mill continues to be a cost area, and at the same time we're being very critical of those costs. So trying to make sure that we can maintain what's there and have it be an asset to the community still, but there's a blank check for anything, no matter how great it is in this community.
Now, as long as we're talking about balance, I think we need to talk about the different areas of the community, 3rd Avenue and Johnson Road, two very separate commercial areas. And at one point, we have to remember this was two communities. It wasn't just one community until it was amalgamated into one. How on earth do you balance your support of both of those areas, both those commercial areas and the businesses involved, without pitting them against each other?
Yeah, for sure. There's always this pitting them against each other, which is so difficult. And interestingly for me, and I know I've been kind of framed as the as only caring about Third Avenue because I have a business on Third Avenue, which my business, of course, is not on Third Avenue, but that doesn't matter on social media. I have a business on Johnston Road as well, interestingly, which many people may not know. Businesses aside, I care very deeply about both areas of this community. For me, growing up here, and it's probably just my age where I didn't live through the two communities thing so much, but I've never really seen that. I mean, I see it in people, absolutely, but I've never really seen that divide in the community myself. And so I maybe come at it from a different approach. Certainly, there's been a lot of conversation about our focus being on the uptown area. Interestingly, and we maybe don't talk about it as much, but we are actually working on plans for Johnston Road as well. So again, recognizing that a lot of what we do is long-term and won't necessarily be completed in this term, we've been working with the provincial government because, of course, Johnston Road is more complicated being, a Ministry of Transportation jurisdiction. We've been working with the provincial government for the last 2 years, really consistently from an elected official standpoint at UBCM down to the staff level, requesting some pedestrian safety improvements and beautification, of course, on Third Avenue or on Johnston Road as they make those improvements. So there has been a study done. The provincial government has been a good partner in this. They've funded a study to look at how they can improve some of the areas that lower Johnston Road mostly that have caused challenges for pedestrians. At the same time, the other area of that study is the Beaver Creek Road, River Road intersection. As we know, that's been a challenging intersection for a long time and has had a lot of conversation and not a lot of progress on it. So we are really happy that the provincial government has given us some options. We've given our feedback. We're not able to share those options yet. The provincial government hasn't made that study public, but we had a commitment from them recently that they're going to start doing survey work and then community engagement on that this year. And we hope to see that project tackled next year. So we, as much as a lot of the public dialogue is around Third Avenue and uptown, certainly it's been more divisive, and that always, makes it a conversation that sticks in the public and gets a lot of focus. A lot of our work actually has been on the Johnston Road corridor, and I think there's some great improvements that we're going to see there in the next 2 years, and probably, realistically on the pedestrian side in the next 5 years.
Oh, Sharie, I feel like we have just barely scratched the surface of what's going on. There's a whole list of things that I haven't even gotten to, but we have come to the end of our time. Can we do this again maybe in September when all the dust has settled from the COVID restrictions? Would you be willing to come back?
Yeah, I would love that. And, people always say we have this long for an interview, hope we can fill it in. I never have a hard time filling interview time. So I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you on this, Nancy, and I would love to do it again.
Oh, Sharie, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much. And thank you, the public, for tuning into this edition of Upfront. We'll see you next time.